Okay, let's have a chat. Let's get real talk time here. I want to call out something so ridiculous and so obnoxious. Let's go. I want to call out this whole trend where people are defending this concept that you don't share your food, like your fries, for example, right? Well, this is indicative of a much bigger problem we have in society. Really, there's some famous quote that we don't have a poverty problem in this world, we have a greed problem, and I could not agree more. And to me, having lived in kind of stiff, waspy, cultures where there's not a whole lot of affection or generosity, let's just say, and then having lived in indigenous cultures where their philosophy is nobody here goes cold or hungry, I can tell you which I prefer. And I can also tell you a story I heard of this Italian-American guy, and he had an African-American guy as his friend, and they were soldiers in the Gulf War, and I believe they were in Afghanistan. And the supply trucks weren't getting through, and everybody was a bit hungry and wondering where their next meal was coming from, and they were down to pretty much nothing food-wise. So the African-American guy had one package of M&Ms left, and this Italian guy tells of how they were sitting on a hill watching the sunrise and sharing that bag of M&Ms. And it was a moment of real camaraderie where he realized that he came from a culture, the Italian culture, where it was mangia, feed people, nourish people, nurture people with food, make sure nobody's hungry. And the African-American guy also came from sort of a communal culture where, you had to share your resources or you wouldn't make it. It was a survival thing. So to me, that's a very, very telling differential. If someone doesn't want to share their toys, their food, their money, they don't want to share their life. And they should stay solo, off to themselves in their ivory tower, and stay lonely, because you never learned the basic kindergarten skill of how to share. And I get it. Some people are germaphobes. They were before COVID. They still are. Okay, fine. Then you order your own fries and you order your friend fries if you have the means and your friend doesn't, right? But I'm going to share my food. And I'm going to share my heart and my life and my opinions. And people who don't like that are not going to like me. And that's okay. They're entitled to that. That's their free will. They don't have to. They can think I'm a sucker. I was once on a date with a guy and he threw a quarter at a homeless man and we had the biggest fight ever, and that was the last date we ever had. And I said, why would you do that? That shows contempt for someone who's suffering, or even indifference if you walk by them and you don't feel something, or you don't try to dig out $1 or $2 or some change. Well, they're just going to use it on drugs. I don't want to fund that. Okay, you don't know that, number one. And that's not everyone's story, number two. And even if they are, what does $1 mean to you versus what it might mean to them? If they are, say, on drugs or alcohol, they might be someone who was molested as a child and ended up in that situation, in that addiction situation, which we call addiction. But I heard a great take on that recently where it's just, fighting your programming. Because your programming, addiction really keeps you from death to a certain extent until you realize that it's leading you towards death. So it's a fine line. I'm not saying addiction is a disease. I don't believe that. I'm not saying it's a character weakness. I don't believe that. I believe it is a trauma response. I believe it is very complex and nuanced, and it's different for everybody, but I believe it is an epidemic in this world, as is hunger. Two of the biggest issues we face on this planet are very interwoven. They are tent cities and homelessness, which neither the liberals nor the conservatives have addressed, and it's gotten worse under both, progressively each year, and human trafficking, child smex, slavery, right? We have to talk in codes because the ones who actually perpetrate these crimes can't handle the blunt language about these crimes because they're very sensitive, right? But they're not generous. And they're not open-hearted, and they don't know how to communicate one-to-one or directly or clearly. So they use the weaponized media. So this is how we do it, because apparently that's how they roll. And that's really sad and really silly, and no new moves there, okay? Stunted. But yeah, if you're coming to my house, I'm going to feed you. I'm going to put out food. Even if it costs me down to my last dollar, I'm going to make sure we're both nourished. And if I go to a place and they don't offer food, I think that's weird and cheap and greedy and strange and withholding. And that shows me a lot about their personality. It shows me they don't care. They have cremated care, which is what the Illuminati and the elites do. They shut down their hearts to the vulnerable. They go into entitlement and privilege and believe that they earned, through their bloodline, through their rituals, through their initiations, they earned their wealth. They didn't. They stole it. They took, and they took, and they take, and they take, and they won't even share some fucking fries. So that tells you exactly who they are. And that is not someone, if they won't share their fries, they won't share their life. They won't share their time, their energy, their resources. They won't share compliments. They won't share affection or touch. It just shows you they're cold and dead inside. So yeah, I'm going to share my fries. I'm going to offer you some of my food. If you don't offer back, I'm going to see exactly who you are. If you want to split the check down the middle and you don't ever pick up the check, I'm going to see exactly who you are. If you never invite me for coffee or for lunch, I'm going to see exactly who you are. If you never, bring a little gift or a little thoughtful thing, I'm going to see exactly who you are. And what you are is cheap. And I don't want cheap people in my life, in my aura, in my bed, in my home, or in my heart. I don't want greedy people around me either. And that's really who runs the world, the top greedy fucktards. And I will say that because that's the dumbest way to be. We're not going to advance or evolve spiritually as a society or individually if you can't share your fucking fries. It does not make you intelligent. It does not make you frugal. It does not make you autonomous or independent. It makes you weird, and it's going to keep you lonely.